Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us on our webinar, Preparing CMOs for the Shift in Local Search. My name is Rachel Larson. I'm the marketing manager here at chatmeter, as well as your moderator for today. I am very excited to introduce chatmeter's founder and CEO, Colin Holmes, along with Forrester research analyst Colin Colburn as your speakers for today. Quick little housekeeping before we begin. We are recording this webinar, and we will be sending that recording out to everyone within 24 hours. And if you guys have any questions during this webinar, please type them in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be sure to get to all of them during the Q&A section at the end. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to Colin Colburn of Forrester to start us off.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And welcome everyone. So happy to be here. And I'm super excited for two reasons. One, to talk a little bit about the research and the content that we have for the next 45 minutes or so. And also because it might be the first time I'm ever also presenting alongside another Colin. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So let's get into this. Before we kind of get into the deep nuggets and grit of this presentation, I want to talk a little bit about broadly what's going on in the marketplace today. So Forrester talks about this as the age of the customer. So this is a business cycle, a business age that we are in. And as you can see on the timeline here, this is an age that has been brought about since about 2010. And what really catalyzed a lot of this is the advent of mobile. If you think about your own businesses, I'm sure that you have seen a significant change in having to think more, having to remodel, reorient yourselves around the customer. The customer has so many more channels that they're able to use today. And it's also catalyzed, I think, a lot more of local activity that we are seeing in the marketplace today, too. So what exactly does this mean? So technology has really been the change agent. People, customers, live, work, and spend differently in the age of the customer than they used to. There are now empowered customers that are causing these economic and market shifts that we are seeing. They're the ones that are basically reshaping industry. They're creating the winners and losers that we see in the marketplace, and they're forcing businesses to evolve or perish. And what that means for us as business leaders, as technology leaders, is we are charged with reorienting our organizations around the customer in order to win, serve, and retain them at a time when really risks have shifted from being first to being late to the market. So there's one really important word that I said in there. That's that customers are empowered. But I would argue that they're not just empowered, they're also entitled, meaning that they have excruciatingly high expectations when interacting with a brand, whether it's digitally, offline, whether it's nationally, whether it's locally. They have really, really high expectations. And really, who can blame them? I think technology has kind of made us more entitled. And I think if you had to summarize this, I think the entitlement, the expectation, is that the customer can get what they want in their media context and moments of need. And the moment isn't unique to just mobile. I think it's unique to every experience, every moment that you're in, where you're interacting with a brand, an agent, an agent, a location, any part of that customer journey. So let's get into what this means for CMOs really quickly. I think that really you can summarize this by saying that marketers and CMOs are charged with making their companies more customer obsessed. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be customer obsessed? There's really 4 principles that guide customer obsession, and the 4 are moving from being customer aware, meaning being more than just going beyond just the what and the how of customer behavior, and really revealing the why, being really illicit about what the customer's needs and motivations are. The second thing is going from being just data rich, because it seems like every business has lots and lots of data, to being more insights driven. So meaning that incorporating information on a case by case basis isn't going to suffice anymore. It really means going beyond that and and thinking about how to apply data when it is available, when it is visible, and when it's secure during that moment of need that that customer is in. The third thing is going from being just perfect to fast. I think that empowered customers have adopted new experiences, and it's sort of brought on hyper adoption, which can happen really, really quickly. And we as leaders, as business leaders, have to think about these opportunities, and instead of getting lost in sort of the minutia or the bureaucracy or the preference that we're trying to make, we really have to think about how we can do this as quick as possible and really get the customer what they're looking for. And the last principle here is going from a siloed organization to a more connected organization. So traditional silos really are sort of the big hindrance today for most organizations. But there are many firms that have enabled frequent cross-functional interactions by doing things like small scrum teams or doing customer journey mapping that helps them establish a new way of working or a new way of organizing their companies. So why should you even be customer obsessed? There's really three reasons. One is revenue growth. So we did a study that found that the companies that are more customer obsessed see the largest increase in sales. So really being able to track that directly to a firm's bottom line. Second thing is that companies that are customer obsessed have a 93% customer satisfaction rate, which is well above the 65% that firms that are not customer obsessed see with their customers. And then thirdly is employee satisfaction. So 40% of companies are more likely to report their employees being happy at work. So that I think is you can actually kind of see the cycle, right? You can see that if your employees are also happy, it's serving the customer better, which is leading to better revenue growth and better satisfaction amongst those customers. So beyond just sort of the high level impacts of the age of the customer, beyond the CMO and beyond just the broader marketing organization, how is this affecting search and the way that people are finding today, the way that they're finding locally, the way that they're finding nationally in many different ways? Let's actually stop here really quickly for our first poll question.
Okay.
The question we have is, where's your business focusing their search marketing efforts today? I think we're going to be opening the poll.
Yes, I just opened up the poll, so everyone, we'll give you about 20 seconds or so to submit your answers, and then we'll see what the results are. Okay, we are getting a ton of results, but there definitely seems to be one majority answer, and that is at the local level. So about 67% of people answered that.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, I don't think we would see that same level or that same number 10 years ago before I talked about the age of the customers. I think that brands were much more focused on, things happening at the national level because it was the best way they were able to scale campaigns, and now you're able to scale them a little bit more on the local level. So that's really cool. All right. So in terms of how this is changing search, there's an immediate first trend that we've identified, and that's that people's search behavior has become much more complicated than ever before. And what that means is people don't just use Google, but they also just don't use search engines the way that we have traditionally thought of them. Think about something like an Amazon or a Pinterest or a TripAdvisor, for instance. This list kind of goes on and it goes on across verticals, but what it's saying is that people use different places, different channels like they do a search engine. And it might not be a search engine like a Google or Bing, but it's one that acts very much like it. Like Amazon is truly the product search engine today, with the majority of people using Amazon as a way to find products. So that's kind of trend number one that I see in the marketplace, is people using multiple places to search and intentionally find information. The second trend is that search is more difficult because of the other ways that people find that are not as intent based. So if you look at these channels, whether it's a Facebook or an Instagram or online video, these are all places that customers are spending a lot of time, and they tell us that they increasingly find stuff like information or websites or a brand's mobile app through these places. And what that means is that these are not places that people are intentionally looking for information. It means that they are just spending time there and are finding information in a more passive, lean back environment. So for us as marketers, it means that there are channels that are not just search engines that we have to account for when we are creating our search strategy and our overall customer acquisition strategy, and making sure that we're complementing what we're doing in some of these intent-based channels with what we're doing in some of these more passive, lean back environments. So I mentioned that data a little bit. This is our data that sort of shows that customers find in lots of different ways today. So the question, we've been asking this question for quite some time now, and from last year's data, we found that people find that majority of the time websites, apps, through either natural search results or Facebook as the top two answers there. So you can see starkly right there, natural search results, very much an intent-based. I am looking for, I need X, Y, or Z, whereas Facebook is more of looking to consume content, to check in with friends or check in with brands on what they're doing, what they're posting. But so that's sort of what's going on in search today, but we also have to account for the way that search is proliferating beyond just desktop and mobile devices. So obviously, two major voice assistants here that we have, Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, are really changing and poised to change the way that search, the way that people find, is done. And when we look at the data that we have in terms of what assistants people use, overwhelmingly you can see that it's Siri. 24% of consumers in the U.S. saying they use Siri, 16% saying they use Alexa. And this is actually really interesting because you can see a little bit of a diversity, a little bit of variety between all of these agents. And when you look at what they do, this is really the important part. When it comes to how people use their voice assistant, today it's really early days. It's an immature way that consumers are using voice assistants. So the top two ways they use it are checking the weather and listening to audio. I'm sure if any of you have an Alexa, if any of you have a Google Assistant in your homes or any of the smart speakers, you can probably relate to this. This is probably something that you do very often. And why do I say this is in its infancy? Why is it immature? Because people aren't really using their voice assistants today like the way we use search engines. So for us as marketers, it means that we don't have a ton of people probably asking about our brand or our product or our service that we're trying to sell, or things that are related to that. But there is a high chance of that changing in the future as the intelligent agent, as the voice assistant becomes smarter, and as the customer adapts and uses these agents more like a search engine. So what does that look like? What does it look like when people ask things that are commercial, things that are related to our product or brand? Well, I actually have an answer for you there. We just did a piece of research that was really, really interesting. We started off by asking Alexa, Google Assistant, Cortana, and Siri 180 commercial questions. So we came up with a bunch of questions across 6 industries that totaled to 180. The industries we asked were questions that were related to CPG and retail, financial services and insurance, technology and telecom, healthcare, auto, and then travel and hospitality. Our overall findings were that 35% of the questions we asked were answered. So not super great. Yes, about a third of the questions we asked were answered, but there was a ton where we just didn't get an answer, or we were given the wrong answer, or we were directed back to search results to go and find out for ourselves. Now, I want to give you a little bit of information about what exactly are those questions we were asking. We were asking things like, what is the best waterproof mascara, or how can I find the best hospital near me, or where can I get advice for my 401k, or what what hotel has availability in New York City for the next 2 nights. So we were asking things like that, things that are very commercial, very applicable to the way that marketers tend to think about search in general. A couple other things. Google Assistant was the best. They actually had the best answer rate of all of them. And I think the last thing is there were some really big shortcomings, and I don't want to get too far into this since the research has not been fully released yet. So I'm giving you all a little bit of a preview. But some shortcomings that we found were things like they're not able to hold a conversation with you, so you can't ask a follow-up question to the question that you previously asked. You also can't ask two questions at the same time. They're not able to take on that kind of experience just yet. And then oddly, one of the other sort of qualitative things that we found is that their answers are a little bit different in terms of how they give them. So what I mean there is Alexa tends to speak kind of fast. Like it was a little bit difficult to keep up with what she was talking about. And then Cortana, for one, tended to give really, really long responses back to us, like so much so that it was over 30 seconds of responses in some cases, which is just a lot of information to take in verbally. So what is the future going to look like for these intelligent agents? Because they are going to become more sophisticated. I said that before. And I just want to run through how we're thinking about this change coming up. So over the next 3 years, I think assistants like Alexa, Cortana, Siri, and Google Assistant are really going to focus most on how to respond to complex questions. So being able to curate content based on the customer and what they know about the customer, where the customer is located, what their previous shopping behavior is, what their preferences are, and being able to give an answer that is contextual to that consumer. Over the 3 to 5 year time period, I think this is where the intelligent agents build on top of that ability to respond and curate information and start to anticipate what a customer's need or want is. So rather than the customer going directly and asking a question to the voice assistant, the voice assistant is able to anticipate based off things like purchase history or where they are or what their preferences are, and be able to ask them, hey, maybe you do need the new pair of running shoes because you haven't bought them in a while and you're probably wearing out some of the bottom of the footing. And then over the 5 year or more time period, I think this is where things get really interesting and where a lot of people tend to think that intelligent agents and voice assistants already are, which is being able to complete simple purchases or decisions on behalf of the customer. So based on what they know about the customer, the things that they're able to anticipate, the affinities that they've been able to gather, being able to make reoccurring purchases or make simple decisions on behalf of the customer, like when it knows that your Under Armour app is hooked up to Google Assistant and it's able to see that you've ran over 300 miles in the past 6 months, say, hey, this is actually the average time when you need a new pair of shoes, and the shoes show up at your front door. So obviously, this can even happen today in some use cases, but this is all based on how this can happen at scale globally for many varieties of consumers. So we still have a ways to go, but this is definitely within the agent's grasp. So what does this mean for you? I get this question all the time, and really what I tell people are there are really two ways to tackle voice search today. We see most companies thinking about this either between skills and SEO. And there are lots of companies, especially within retail and consumer goods, who have built skills, or we would also call them actions within Google Assistant. But skills within Alexa is kind of the most common use case that we see today. The other probably more common route that people go down is SEO. The reason being is because all of these assistants are using search results for the most part, to give information back to the consumer. So I want to focus a little bit on the SEO piece because I think that's for many of you, and especially on the local level, where you can make more of an impact. So there's really, when it comes to succeeding in voice, there's really four things that you need to be doing. One is literally tuning SEO to voice. So thinking about how the information on your website is answering questions that people might be asking through a voice assistant. I actually have a really good example of a company that's thought a little bit about this. We spoke with Humana for the research we did about a year ago on voice search. And Humana, what they had done was they had tapped into a bunch of existing tools they were already using. They were using a social listening platform to understand what conversations people were having on social media about their brand, about their product. They tapped into an SEO platform as well, and a platform to understand what is the content that I have on my site, how are people searching for that content, and what is the content my competitors are also creating around answering people's questions through search. And then the third thing that Humana tapped into was a call analytics tool, which is a tool that works with your call center. So it tracks the number and types of calls that your call center is getting. So it doesn't even have to be a call center; it can be a location too that they're able to track. They're able to track, by location, how many calls you're getting and what are the common things people are asking about. So they basically came up with an aggregated version of what is the overall demand for questions and things people want to know more about as it relates to our product, our service. So that was their kind of way of thinking about how can we incorporate that content that we might not be having but people are asking about in a variety of channels into our website content to improve our SEO. The second thing that's really important, and we found this in the research we just did around voice search, is that the agents are using different resources, different channels to answer some of our questions. So, for instance, when we asked Siri questions about stuff that was locally relevant, so what's the best restaurant in New York City, they were sometimes serving us Yelp information. Or even open table. I think we got once for one of the questions that was related to food and entertainment. So that means that you have to think about this idea of discovery marketing, identifying all of these places that your customers either intentionally or passively find in, and creating some sort of visibility, or whether it's Yelp or open table, creating a presence there so that people are able to see that information within those channels, but also so the assistants are able to use that information when giving back to a customer an answer through voice search. The third thing, and I'm sure many of you this will resonate, is figuring out how to localize your overall marketing efforts. And the reason I'm bringing this one up is because we talked to a company that was thinking a lot about this as it relates to voice, which is they know that customers tend to ask questions in search that are very, very relevant to where they are, near me kinds of searches. And their hypothesis is that the same will be applied to voice assistants, whether it's asking for directions or asking for what's the best place for X, Y, or Z near me. So what they had started looking at was figuring out within the content of their website, the content they're pushing out on social channels, how can they make it more in tune with the different regions, the different states, the different markets they were serving, so that they had a variety of content that was able to answer questions that was related to the area that someone might be asking a question or searching within. And then the fourth task, which is one that is probably the hardest and sort of biggest one here, is thinking about and really putting a greater emphasis around brand marketing. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if you think about that future use case I walked us through when it comes to voice, the assistants are going to know your affinities. They're going to know what brands you tend to prefer over others. If it knows that you only buy Nike products when it comes to your athletic wear and your running gear, it's not going to serve you anything related to Adidas or to Reebok. So if you don't have those existing good emotional connections with your customers today, that good customer experience to foster a good brand relationship, the assistant's eventually going to pick up on that with your customers, and you can eventually be blocked out of ever being a quote unquote answer when a customer has a question through voice assistants. All right, so I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about how's Google changing the way that search is done today, and what are some of the changes that Google is making from a strategic perspective that changes the way that we as marketers have to work with them. So there's really three areas that Google has really been most focused on as of late, and I want to just briefly get into each one of them. Number one is the emphasis around their Google marketing platform. So their cross-channel advertising platform today that they have that really is about trying to bring on multiple different parts of the organization onto Google Marketing Platform. So we've already seen companies like Major League Baseball and Sprint who are bringing on their digital marketing, their data science teams, a bunch of different teams within cross-functional teams within the organization onto Google Marketing Platform. The second area that Google's really focused on is touting its automated capabilities for brands that really don't have the resources that they need. So what they've done as of late is release things like smart campaigns, specifically actually for local businesses. So these are campaigns that help you as a local business, whether you're a store owner or a franchisee, being able to scale those campaigns in a more easy way. And being able to automate some of that process using some of Google's machine learning. And then if you're more of a national advertiser or a national marketer, Google also released responsive search ads, which are ads where you're able to upload a bunch of different meta descriptions and titles, and Google will use its own algorithm, its own machine learning to figure out what is the optimal title and description that they should be serving in a paid search ad to a customer based on what they know about that customer. And then the third thing is expanding into offline and brand marketing. This is probably the biggest strategic shift and biggest change that Google has made as of late, moving away from just focusing on online direct response and focusing more on things like measuring how online activity drives offline activity and measuring what impact your efforts within SEO, within paid search has on brand awareness, brand reach, or the affinity that a customer has with a brand. So why are they focusing on some of this? I think number one, 84% of U.S. sales are going to be transacted offline in 2019. So Google still sees that there is huge importance on behalf of many marketers to not just drive interest, consideration, purchase online, but also offline being a huge factor there. And then you also see that there's kind of the story that they're able to tell is really nicely given because of the influence that digital has on offline. So our data also shows that 36% of those offline sales this year are going to be influenced by digital activity. So as a marketer, I'm kind of looking at this and saying, well, that means that not only do we have to be doing a lot of good stuff offline, but we also got to be thinking about when we're doing digital marketing, whether it's digital advertising or any sort of organic marketing online, how is that going to affect what the person does if they're searching in a store, if they're on the go, if they're looking to go into a location or find a place to buy or purchase from. And that's why Google's really working to make offline activity a whole lot more measurable. And we see more companies that are asking about this, that are thinking about this, and thinking about using Google's in-store tracking to be able to see what is the activity that is happening online, and how can we understand what that's doing to the people that are coming into the store, the people that are making purchases offline. There's obviously a really big value exchange here, though, and that is you need to be able to hand over a lot of your data, a lot of your POS data, in order to see some of this. And that for many is a risk that some marketers are just not willing to take, because of handing over your most valuable data to a quasi frenemy, if you will. So I want to get into a little bit in terms of what does all this mean in terms of how Google's changing, and how search is changing. I think from a local perspective, there's a bunch of advantages and a bunch of opportunities. Number one being the intelligent agents are actually good at answering location-based questions. I didn't mention this before, so I was going to leave it till now. During that research we found, anytime we asked questions that were related to going somewhere or something near me, they had the answer a lot of times, because they're often being done either through a mobile device or through a device that is connected to the location that I am in. The second thing is, obviously we know digital marketing, digital advertising is hugely important to the offline behaviors that we see consumers take. And then the last thing, and I just mentioned this, is that Google's really both a friend and a foe when it comes to thinking about local marketing and thinking about how you can drive more people in store, drive more people to your locations using digital marketing. And then broadly, before I wrap and hand over to the other Colin, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the key takeaways. So one, going back to the age of the customer in terms of having to reorient, having to grasp the customer and understand how that changes our business, what we need to be doing, is here for the next 10 years or more. And really your goal is to become a more customer-obsessed company with some of those principles that I walked through. And then second thing here is voice search is really in its infancy, as we saw from the research that we did. But I do think it's going to become a much bigger part in terms of how people are searching and finding information digitally going forward. And then the last thing is Google is one that you need to weigh and sort of proceed with caution in terms of how you're using them from a local level. They're obviously almost necessary, in terms of establishing Google My Business and establishing, your presence as it relates to the locations that might be showing up within search results. But when it comes to things like measurement or things like even, different advertising tactics and techniques of using Google Marketing Platform, you almost have to weigh, how much is this, how much are you sacrificing, or how much, are you willing to go into sort of uncharted territories with Google for your own success. With that, I am going to pass it over to the other Colin, and really appreciate and glad you guys got to listen in, and we'll be taking questions after the end of the presentation.
Great, thank you, Colin. Appreciate the intro from a fellow Colin. I think that's the first introduction from another Colin I've ever had. So good to see our name is getting out there. Let's start off with a quick little poll question. So the question on my screen is covered up. All right, how confident are you that a consumer could find your business in an unbranded voice search? So not someone looking for your brand, but really doing a keyword or a question-based search. Would love to see who's either done any testing and if they're starting to see any results from that. So please hop on the poll and let us know what you find. We'll share the results here in just a second.
Okay.
It's good to see very few have selected no idea, so that's a good thing. People are starting to
A very good thing.
starting to get in there, yeah. Like, I don't know what voice search is, then you shouldn't be in marketing. All right, so we're going to share the results here. It looks like the majority are 60% somewhat confident. So good to see that people are starting to even do some testing and seeing results here. 30% not very confident. You're not alone. It's still very early here as well. And only 4% are 100% confident. I've tested and confirmed the results. And so huge area of opportunity there, obviously. And that's probably a good indicator of where voice search is in the marketplace as well. Of it's adoption, I should say, has definitely outpaced marketing's ability to kind of act on this. And there's a lot of opportunity in the future for analytics and testing and testing capabilities that I think we'll see emerge over the next 12 to 24 months. Okay, so appreciate everybody participating there. So just to get started here, this is a little agenda, and we're going to cover 4 things marketers can do today around optimization and local. So we're going to talk a little bit about branded versus unbranded keywords, what those are, and how to optimize for those. We're going to talk a little bit about responding to reviews and give you a sense of what the marketplace is looking like in terms of responding today and why you need to be responding to that review content. We're going to talk a little bit about listings and what's some of the changing things that are shifting there in the listing management space. And then also talk a little bit about local social and what's kind of changing in the local location pages within social on different platforms. So we're going to dive in here just a second. By the way, just to give a quick overview on chatmeter, if you're not familiar, I started the company about 9 or 10 years ago, and we are a platform for helping brands with engagement and discovery for consumers at the time of need around improving their presence and reputation for each of their individual store locations or customer locations. So we work with restaurant chains and hotel chains and automotive dealerships at kind of that local search optimization. So I want to just give a little background there, because some of the data we're going to be reporting on is from our platform and is from our customers. So hopefully we're seen as a kind of an expert in the space on some of this information. So that does bring us to my next slide, which is talking about branded versus unbranded keywords. So what we did is took a look at all of the location data that we have in our platform, a lot of our client information. You can see some of the brands that we work with here. And so we have over information on over 2 million locations, and we started to look at how are customers discovering their locations or stores locally. So on the right, you'll see about 80% of the content of the discovery is happening within unbranded searches, and this is something that's kind of a common misconception that we have, especially with a large number of big brands. We go to we may talk to the CMO at McDonald's, and we ask them, what are you doing with local search, and are you ranking well? And they're like, yeah, we come up #1 for McDonald's. What are you talking about? And we're like, well, what about unbranded searches? And they continue to say, well, no, everybody just searches for McDonald's. That's why we spend $1 billion on marketing every year, because they know our brand. And time again, we say, okay, we'll go into your Google My Business analytic data, and you'll see exactly the pie chart that we're showing you, which is the majority of your business is coming from unbranded searches. Things like fast food near me, or if it's Starbucks coffee near me, or who has the best vanilla latte, those types of things are what's driving those unbranded searches. So it's typically eye-opening for a lot of CMOs. So if you haven't looked at that data with your marketing team, I suggest you go into your Google My Business data and look at that yourself. And just to add a little bit of clarity here, so it's very clear on what we're talking about versus branded versus unbranded. So on the left side, obviously a branded search would be Starbucks, and on the right side, that would be coffee. And you can see obviously a tremendous number of options come up when you're doing unbranded searches. And so there's a variety of components that go into winning that war there on the unbranded search. It's not just about location, reviews, listing accuracy. There's multiple pieces that go into winning that war. But the important thing to also understand is there are opportunities and reasons why you would want to focus on branded, and there's other opportunities you want to focus on unbranded. So on the branded side, in the example of Starbucks here, let's say I'm a Starbucks fan and I travel a lot. I may be going into different cities. Now it's a matter of retaining that customer as I'm traveling and making sure that I am coming up, or the nearby Starbucks has the correct information, it has the right phone number, if I want to call and place my order ahead, and obviously making sure that it has the right information. If that Starbucks location is closed, you want to be updating that information, because the last thing you want is a regular customer going there and not finding your location. So it's very important to make sure you manage that from a retention basis. And then on the unbranded side, really that is all about customer acquisition. So again, making sure you're showing up in the rankings and you have optimized listings with photos and exciting information about the customer experience. That's going to help you win the war on that unbranded search. Now, the other aspect that is a vital component of winning that war is the reviews component. And so it's pretty common sense that having, you want to make sure that you have a large number of reviews, more than your competitors, and you have a higher rating than your competitors. What a lot of people don't know today, and a lot of CMOs actually don't know today, is that your review response rate is having a huge impact on those rankings as well. And so this is actually a study by Andrew Shotland from Local SEO Guide, who looked at over 3,000 keyword searches and reported on the fact that if you're not responding to reviews, Google is actually punishing you in the rankings. So that's the number one component here, is the number of reviews not responded to has a tremendous impact on the ranking side. So it's very important to respond to those reviews. And what we often have, or we often see as well, is there's often a common misconception at the CMO level in which, I have a whole social media team and their whole job is to respond to all the content out there. But unfortunately, a lot of those social media tools, whether it's Hootsuite or Sprinkler or other tools, they don't pull in reviews. So the perception is someone is actually doing that work for them. And there's so many cases that we'll do audits in which we point out that nobody is actually handling the review response. So it's important, if you're a CMO out there, to make sure you're talking to your team and ask if they have a platform like a chatmeter or other platform that can pull in this pull in this as well. And another way is just go look at all your reviews, right? It's somebody actively responding. So what we've actually seen is among big brands, and this is a new retail report that we just released last month across both retail and restaurants, they're unfortunately failing at this. So the average response rate across 12 of the largest brands in the country was a 1.4% response rate, which is pretty horrendous. You can see some of the biggest brands in the country, whether it's Jack in the Box or Target or Walmart, they have a review response rate of 0%. And in the restaurant space, Dunkin' Donuts and Best Buy, again, a response rate of 0%. So what does that mean? That means they're losing the war against other people that are responding to those reviews. That's the expectation that customers and consumers have today. When they write content online, they expect engagement. They expect a response from the brand. And I think your social media teams know that, and you've encouraged that on the social side, but you might be missing the mark, or many are missing the mark on the local side. So what's an effective strategy to respond? One is you need a tool. So you need a tool like chatmeter that has relationships with Yelp, that has relationships with Google and Facebook, and can aggregate all this information, because it is difficult. There's a lot of reviews that are coming in. You don't need to hire a huge team of people to do responding. There are some key functionality in our platforms that allow you to create templates, is a great example. So there might be 4 or 5 different things you want to respond to. It might be wait times. Another issue might be food quality. The different might be, the cleanliness of the place or the cleanliness of the bathrooms. So you can have these templates created, and someone can then automatically respond to those very, very quickly and save a huge amount of time. We even have things like rotating templates, so you can respond to thousands of reviews with a rotating template within minutes. So don't be overwhelmed by the task. It is achievable. We've achieved this time and time again with many, many clients as well. The next evolution here is happening on listing management and listing optimization. So for clarity, listings could, are your listings across local search sites like Google Maps, Yelp, Facebook, Foursquare, those types of local listings. So in the past, it was traditional that you really just would focus on name, address, and phone number. And now, as Google evolves and the search engine algorithms evolve, they're focused on NAP plus website, category, hours of operation, descriptions. So you want to make sure that you have the full breadth of information out there when you're working with a listing management provider. If you're trying to do this yourself, which can be very difficult, you want to make sure that you have optimization across all of those listings. And again, that's going to help you not only from your rankings perspective, but the more breadth you have on your individual listings, the more likely someone's going to pick on your listing and actually do the research and homework and spend time looking at that listing to try and understand if I'm going to have a good experience at your location. So it helps not only from rankings, but also winning that war against your competitors. So on the local social side, we like to educate CMOs on the importance of optimization on your location pages. So it was great to see the poll earlier as people are starting to realize and recognize they have to market at the very local level. So that's really what this is all about, because we still have tons and tons of big brands that have not done anything around claiming those individual pages. Typically, you see a lot of duplicates that are created out there because even consumers can create individual location pages for your brand, and you may not even know that there's a brand page out there and people are actually posting reviews on those pages. And so it's vitally important to make sure you clean up that and now start engaging, because again, people are putting content on there, they're putting reviews on there, they're commenting. We often see whole conversations going on between consumers in which someone has a bad experience and someone else chimes in and said, yeah, I had that experience too. And it becomes kind of a hate war, which you want to try to kind of put in the bud, nip that in the bud before it gets out of control. And as you can see here, 74% of consumers are using social media to guide those purchase decisions. So very, very important. Many of you have social teams. A lot few of you are focused at the very local level. And again, you can have a tool like a chatmeter or other one that's helping you claim all those pages, put them into one single platform, and engage with consumers all within a single platform. Here on the Instagram side, we are educating people that recently Instagram has now created business pages for all of your locations. So this is a new development now, as they've obviously, Instagram was acquired by Facebook. They're following a lot of the same functionality that Facebook Local has or has had. And so on these pages, there's call to action buttons. You can call directly from those pages. There are now directions you can get to your locations. This is all kind of new, mapping functionality that wasn't really existing before. Unfortunately, right now, there's no ability to kind of claim all of your Instagram pages at this point. This is something we anticipate will happen in the next 6 to 12 months, similar to what we can do now on Facebook. But at least be aware of these images or be aware of the pages themselves, and you will start to have engagement on these that you're going to want to collect and aggregate. And you want to make sure your tools are collecting and aggregating all those location pages and the content on them as well. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, all of the components that you want to do around kind of optimizing for local. And so just a little commercial plug here. The essential ingredients for local SEO are listings and listing management, reviews, review management, local SEO being, having a rank tracker so you can see progress over time. Optimize for location pages. We didn't talk about that, but making sure your location pages now are optimized for voice search. I know Colin spent a lot of time talking about voice search, and that's really going to be the next evolution of how you want to update those store pages with individual product content offerings and details, as well as tagging those with the right schema markups for voice. And as we were talking about the last couple of slides, social media. So that's ChatMeter. We are kind of an all-in-one platform for all of these components in one place.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Colin. That is the conclusion, and we have just about 10 minutes left to answer any questions. So if you guys have questions that you want to ask either Colin, please fill them out in the question box to the side. Okay, so one of the first questions coming in, this is actually just from Colin Holmes' section, is how do you know what unbranded keywords people are using?
Is that for me?
Yep.
Right, which Colin? There's a couple different ways. Certainly, I'm sure many of the marketers here are used to kind of understanding what your competitors are doing. That's obviously one place that you want to start looking at. And there's obviously a lot of tools out there that'll help you understand what keywords your competitors are focused on. Certainly opening up and looking at source code of those competitors is a key element there. Local is an interesting dynamic because in many cases, there's I would say there's less cases, or it's less common that you have a ton of long tail keywords because there's only so many types of categories. If you're a restaurant, you have restaurant, and you're Indian restaurant, and there's fewer categories, I guess, that you could search on. But as we look at the world of voice search, that's starting to change a little bit and become a little more long tail. So that's where you're going to start brainstorming things like, who has the best Penang curry near me, right? And so those are kind of some areas where I was talking about. You want to start to tag your location pages with those product searches, have reviews on those location pages, and have that data meta tagged for voice search as well. So I think a lot of the same traditional keyword tools that everybody's using today are still going to apply. And a lot of the same strategies apply. It's not really different from a local perspective, but I would challenge everybody from a voice search perspective to start brainstorming and looking at what are the list of keywords that I would be able to convert on as people are asking a lot more detailed questions.
Okay, thank you. Colin Colburn, I have a question for you. So someone asked, in the your first slide, you were talking about the age of the customer. That started in 2010. We are in 2019, so what do you see as coming next?
Oh God, this question. I always set myself up for it, I guess. This is something that we are actually at Forrester thinking about quite a bit. I actually don't have an answer. We had and this sort of requires like a whole lot of people, a whole lot of analysts at Forrester to kind of think through this. Like I said, we still have another 10 years. It's typical for these business ages to last at least 20 years. Like, it's kind of funny, as fast as things move and as fast as things change, they also sort of stay the same in some ways. So it's really hard to say. Like, anything beyond 5 years is really, really difficult to predict. So I guess it's kind of a wait and see. Like, I think we'll have some better ideas, I would guess, by the end of this year.
Yeah, that is a pretty difficult question to answer, predicting the future, essentially.
Future is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
This question is about chatmeter. So Colin Holmes, they asked, who are chatmeter's competitors and how does its product compare to them? Just a quick little brief on that.
Oh, interesting. Well, so that's probably maybe it's kind of it's a very broad-based question, just because we touch so many different things, as you can see in our platform that we were talking about. We have competitors, obviously, in the social media space, and we have competitors in listings, and there's competitors that are kind of focused on specifically on reputation, and so it's really, I think, the all-in-one solution that a lot of customers turn to us when you're asking about the product and how it compares to us. That is really the aspect of having all of those systems and services in one place has been, I think, a reason why a lot of customers turn to us rather than some of our competitors. I mean, there are some key things that we do that others don't do, but I'm not going to get into a lot of the details. But I think at the end of the day, that's the biggest challenge for most marketers, is that the complexity of marketing today has gotten so crazy. If you look at the, I think it's called the MarTech 5000, there's over 5,000 marketing tech companies out there. And so, people are tired of logging into multiple dashboards and looking for solutions that help understand the relationships between all of these things. And that's ultimately why I've built Chatmeter the way I've built it, is that your listing optimization, your review response, and your social media activity at the local level all essentially has an impact on the discovery component and the rankings component, making sure that you rank well as you have optimized listings. So essentially customers will choose you over the competitors when you're battling it out at the very local level and in that local search. So kind of maybe a little bit of a roundabout answer, but essentially, it is that all-in-one solution that I think has been most effective for enterprise customers. It's designed for that multi-location business because those are tremendously challenging when you have different users, you have corporate care teams, you have operations, and then you have marketing that all have different needs within the platform. And I think we built that successfully to address those needs. And I feel like we are seeing that successful because I can toot our own horn and mention that our NPS scores, which I'm sure many marketers are familiar with NPS or Net Promoter Score, is a 76, which is one of the highest in the country. So pretty excited and proud about that.
Okay.
And I appreciate the plug from whoever asked that question.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. This one is about, again, on the unbranded or branded keywords. They asked, so should I not be running my branded ad campaigns anymore? Are those fully obsolete now? And either Colin Holmes or Colin Colburn could answer it, but since it was in your section, Colin Holmes.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely you have to continue your branding campaigns. And this is, I would say the unfortunate world that we live in, especially at Google, is that as Google has changed over the years and it becomes a lot less transparent as to what an ad is versus an organic listing, and especially within mobile devices now, just everybody just clicks on the top result. And so there can be cases in which your competitors are buying your keyword. And so you're going to have to, in many cases, replace those and make sure you win the war, because the last thing you want is someone searching for your brand and your competitor winning out that transaction. And so that's one area, and just continuing to make sure that your brand awareness is there. So, and of course, you want to make sure that that's happening across other platforms. So not only search and SEO, but you look at Facebook advertising and other channels where the discovery is very different. It's important to make sure you kind of continue with some of those campaigns. Colin, do you have other things to add there?
The only thing I would add, I tend to agree. I think there is value. There are reasons to buy your branded keyword terms. There are also reasons not to. I really think it's about doing really deep analysis and some, you know, some ideating about what is the intent that the user has when they are searching for certain branded or product related terms that are proprietary to you. Um, and it also depends on what the landscape looks like. Like if there is a lot of competitive um, keyword bidding that is being done on your branded terms, you obviously want to be defensive. Um, but I don't think that we want to be at a point where we are today where not most, but a lot of the brands that I speak with, like large brands that are spending a vast majority of their paid search budget on branded terms. It's not smart. That's actually not acquiring new customers. It's being super defensive, which is good because you do want to try and defend against your own territory. But if paid search is truly about acquiring new customers and growing the base of people that you are trying to reach and sell product, sell service to, and you're spending 70, 80% of that budget on branded terms, you're not accomplishing that goal. So it really, not to say something that is so obvious, but it really is about goals and about what the landscape looks like for you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Colin and Colin. We are just at time now, so awesome. Really great information from both of you guys, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
All right, thanks, everyone. Thank you. See ya.